we are going to learn about Web API CRUD operations. In this CRUD operations, what is this CRUD operations? Create, read, or retrieve, okay, update, and delete. So this is the CRUD operations we are going to implement, and we are going to implement using Web API. What is API stands for? Application Program Interface. Okay, so and database will use a SQL Server as your database, and the approach will use a code first approach in entity framework core. So this is the agenda of today class. Okay, let's implement this. So let's implement the Web API CRUD operations using entity framework core using code first approach. The database will use here SQL Server database. Okay, let's start. So now I'll go to Visual Studio. Okay, so as we have created yesterday the basic Web API project, so I'm going to create a new model. So let me create one folder called models, add folder. So inside the model folder, I am going to create one class. User model, user model. This is my class. So for this, I'll create one ID, name, email, user ID, name, email, password, phone, begin, which is long, begin to database, which is long in the code. And here I need a identity. How can I create the identity? So like this, key, which is derived from system.componentModel.data annotations namespace. Let's add this. So from there, we are going to specify the key attribute so that it will act like a primary key of your table, right? So now this is my table. Let's build this solution. So if you don't have any build errors, let's go and create the DB context file. So how can I create the context file? So once we have the entity, second thing, you need to create the context. So how you'll go and create the context? So I'll go here. I'll create one folder. Let's create one folder, DB or data, something like this. So we are not in solution. Let's remove this. Let's create within the project, right click, add folder. So data, I'll keep the name as data. So inside this, we are going to add one class user data. Yes. Excuse me. Context. So here I'm going to give the name user data context. Click on create. Now I have created this. So this is your DB context. Now it has to derive from the DB context namespace. So if you need this namespace, it has to derive from, we need some package here. What is that package? Entity framework core. Okay. So let's install those packages. How to install those packages? Go to your project. So if you see there is a dependencies packages, right click, manage NuGet packages. Select this option. So entity framework core. This is the package we have to install. So since we are using, what is the version? 7. .NET 7 we are using. So don't go for 8 now. So let's go with the 7 itself. I'll go with 7.0. Let me install. Click on OK. Accept. Now, and what else? Entity framework core tools. So why this tools is required when you want to do the migrations like add migration, drop database, or update database, all those migrations or scaffold DB context, all those things, it can be enabled with this package, which is Microsoft.Entity Framework Core.Tools. Install. So what is the version? I'll go with 7.0. Since my application is 7.0, so I'll go with the same version so that I won't get any conflicts here. Click OK. Accept. Installed. Next. SQL Server, Entity Framework Core.SQL Server. Why we are going to use the SQL Server database for our backend? So for storage, I'll use this. So why this is required? This package to make all your DB connections, all those things can be taken care with this package. So done. 3 packages got installed. So what are the packages we have installed? Entity Framework Core, Tools, and SQL Server. So now, so go to DB context. Now add this namespace using Entity Framework Core. So now it'll work. So what next? We have to create one constructor. What is this constructor? Default constructor. Public default constructor I'll create. And this inside I'm going to specify DB context options. Colon base options. Okay, that connection string we are going to specify in the program.cs. Okay, so here we're going to specify the options. And once this is done, what next? We have to register your entity. What is your entity? Which is user model. So how to register this? Here, go here, add public dbset, and here we are going to specify your model name, which is user model. Paste it here. User model. So now we need to add this namespace, which is web API.models. So let's create an entity for it. User models get set. So this is done now. So our context is ready. Context file is ready now. So now build the solution. We should not get any build errors here. This is done. No builders. Okay. Succeeded. So what next? Let's go to program.cs file. Here, what I do here? Now we need to add the DB connection here. Okay. So how to add? So before that, we need a connection string. Where we need a connection string? In the app setting.json. Here, we should add your connection string. Connection strings like this. So now give some default connection server name. What is your server name? Go to your SQL server. This is your server name. So copy this server name, paste it here. So next, you have to give your database name. If you have a database, you can create your database name. If you can use the existing one. If you want to create new one, you can specify some database name. So here, so I don't have user database. I am going to give the database user DB. So this is my database name. So next, the security. Are you using a Windows authentication or SQL Server authentication? If you are using a Windows authentication, you have to give the integrated security true or integrated security SSPI. So if you are using a SQL Server authentication, then you have to give the your username and password of the connection string. Since I'm using the Windows authentication, so I will give integrated security true or SSPI. So you can use either integrated security true or integrated security SSPI. So what is the difference? Integrated security doesn't work in all SQL providers. It's through exception when you use the OLEDB provider. So integrated security SSPI is preferred to work with SQL client as well as OLEDB provider. If you are using only SQL providers, then go for integrated security true. If you are going with the OLEDB as well as SQL client, then go with integrated security SSPI like this. So now I'll go with this integrated security SSPI. So now you no need to give the username and password. So and there is trusted connection. So what is this trusted connection? A trusted connection is the same thing in Windows authentication in SQL Server 2005, authenticated done by the domain. So how it should work? So like this, trusted connection is true, not 100 when you mean is using Windows credential 100% equivalent to integrated security SSPI or integrated security true. So and encrypt false. So what is this encrypt false? So encrypt false. So here, this is how manually. If you go and select this, here you will get the option encrypt enable true or false. So let's implement the. So this is how we'll set the connection string. So I'll just give like a default. This is my connection string name. So now what I will do. So here I'll go to program.cs. Now builder.services dot add. So we have to add the context. What is this? Add db context. So we have to specify the context name. What is your db context name? User data context. This is my data context name. So now options will create lambda here. Options start. Options dot use use SQL Server. So here you will specify the use SQL Server. So now we have to provide the connection string. Builder dot services dot add connection start. Add connections. Builder dot configuration dot get connection string of your connection string name. So this is how we are going to specify your connection string name. So now that is done. So let's implement the migration now. So how to add migration? Go to tools, NuGet package manager console. Now I'll go and add the package. What is the migration command? Add migration migration name, any name I can give. So for example, I'll give my first migration. Click enter. Build started. Build succeeded. First it will check for the build. So now it's added the migration. So what is the second command? Update database. So it will apply these changes to the database now. If there is any errors, it will give you the errors here. As of now, it got created a table like this: user models, ID, name, email, password, like this. It's got created. So if you go and see this, refresh the database. So there is a user DB. If you expand this, there is a table. If you expand this, we could able to see the user model table with this columns. The size by default it will give like n varchar max. So whatever sizes you want, we can specify there. And this is migration history. Now in the application, if you see, this is the migration, my first migration name. Okay, which has all these things like what is database size, columns, table name. And if you see, there is a folder got created with name of migrations. All the migration details we have here. Understood, guys? This is how the migration will work. Now we could able to interact with the database. So first thing what I'll do, I'll go and create one controller. How to create controller? Right click, add controller. Okay. So as we discussed yesterday, here we have to go with API, and here I'll go and select the API controller with read write actions. API controller with read write actions. So once I select this, so by default, all the read write actions will come. Okay. So if you don't want that, you can go with API controller itself, or you can go with the read write actions. So I'll go with, we have seen already empty. So I'll go with read write actions now. Click OK. So give the controller names. So I'll give like a manage user. This is my, I'll give the controller name. Click add. So I have given the controller name. Now, so by default, it created the controller, which is API controller. Okay. So what is the controller name? Manage user. So what are the methods by default? It creates HTTP get is the attribute for get method, and get ID. So this is the attribute. Post to do the insertion, put to do the update, delete to do the deletion. Okay. Now what I do, let me implement some record to it. Okay. So if you want to implement here, what you need, instead of string value, you need a model. You need to get the data in the form of model. What is the model? We have user model. Correct. So user model. So what is the insert operation? Okay, in the entity framework. So if you want to implement the insert operation, first thing you need to create the data context object. How you will create? Will create using the constructor, like dependency injection will do. Okay. How dependency injection will work? Private. What is your DB context name? User DB context. Okay. Underscore user DB context. So next we'll create a controller, public manage user controller. This is your default constructor, and here we are going to create instance. Good morning. Use the injection here. Like this, we are going to create the inject. Now, so if you want to inject like this, right? So what you need in the constructor, so need a argument like this, use a DB context. So same thing we are going to inject here. So this is dependency injection, what we are doing here. Okay. So now using this context, okay. So or you can give one simple name, DB context, any name. So every time we can make use of this DB context now. So first thing we have to do the insert. How to do insert? To do the insert, underscore DB context dot add. Add is the command to insert the data. So next underscore DB context dot save changes. Okay. So that's it. Insertion is done. Right. So now I want to test this. Okay. So when you run this, run the application. Manage user. We have get, post, get with argument, put, delete, all these methods. Now I need to implement the post. I need to test this post action. Try it out. Okay. So what is the ID I have to give? ID is a primary key. And let me give the one as ID. Name Ram. Email Ram at gmail.com. That is the email ID. Password, for example, at 123 AB first dollar, something like this. Okay. So some password, and let's give the phone number. So now let's click on the execute. Just keep the debugger here. So I'll keep the debugger in the constructor as well. So let's click on the execute. So first it comes to the constructor. So now it is null. So after this injection, it is going to initialize. So now DB context will have the value like this, right? AB first web API. So what is the DB context? Got initialize now. Now it will go to your post action. So what is the model? How you are getting the data? So like this, you are getting the data. So first thing, you go and add your data. Insertion is done, and then save changes, which will do the commit. So if any exceptions occur, it will occur here. So what is the exception here? So identity, you have to set the off. Why? Because by default, it will ask you to give you the identity. So we set this key attribute, right? In the model, if you see user model, we have set the key attribute. So by default, it will consider as identity. So if you don't want that auto generation, identity is nothing but auto generation. If you don't want that, just remove this ID. Now let's do the insert again. Go to this. So now it will do the insertion. It did. Okay. So come back. So one record got inserted now because there is no error here. 200, we get the response. Okay, success. So now let's go and see the database whether data is inserted or not. Select top 2000 rows, 200 rows. So we could able to see there is one record got inserted. Let me insert one more record. Sham. Sham. Click on execute. We could able to see there is one more record will get added here. Now let's see this. Let's see this. We could able to see record. So let me add one more record. Sita. Sita. Execute. So I don't want debugger. Disable this breakpoint. Click on execute. It will create it here. So 200 success. Go and see the database. Execute. We would able to see there is a record got inserted here. So next, let me try to insert one more record. One more data. Right? Like this, we could able to insert the data. How many records you want? You can add those many records. Execute. Go and create the. So we have these many records now. So let's see the other methods now. We have seen the insert, right? So what is the insert command? We'll do the add, which will do the insertion, and save changes will do the commit, right? So now let's implement the get method. So how we'll implement the get method? So like this. Simple underscore db context dot. So what is your table name? User models dot to list. We need to get all the records. So this is return. So and here we are returning the string, but what we need to return here? User model. So this is your get method. So let's test this. We should get all the data now. Run it. So get. So which should get all the records in the table. Execute. So what it will do? It will return the list of users. In the form of JSON data. 1, Ram, 2, Shyam, Sita, Hanuman. So Lakshman. There are 5 records in the database which it is executed. All those 5 records here. So now, so this is the URL. So outside also, if you want to access this, just just give this. It will give you the data like this wherever you want. Just access this. It will give you the data in the form of JSON. So next, I want to get a particular record so that I'll pass the ID here. So whenever I pass the ID, so I have to filter and give that particular record. How it will work? Underscore DB context dot user models dot first default. If there is more records, t implies a lambda expression t dot ID, which is user ID equals to ID, which should match with this ID, fetch that particular record and return. So here the return type is user model. So now keep a debugger here. Let's run it. So get by user. So try it out. So what is the user ID? For example, I'll give 5. Click on execute. So it has to go and fetch that fifth record from the database. It should return same here. What is the fifth record it got? It got Lakshman. So with ID 5. So let's identify. Yes, with ID 5, I have record called name of Lakshman. So I will give 3, execute. We got the Sita. Understood? This is how get by ID will work. So what else we have? Put and delete. So now put is also similarly like your post. So here it do the update. Earlier it was doing the add. Here it has to do the update. So similarly like that, we'll specify here. But what else you need to give here? So it is just a insert command. You have to tell like the entity is modified. Underscore db context dot entry of entity, which is nothing but your model dot state equals entity state dot modified. If you specify this, it will think like the entity is modified. So it will do the update. Let's run this. So now, so try it out. So we need to do the update. For example, which record I want to update? I want to update second record. So what is the ID? 2. So what name I want? Krishna. So what is the email? Krish at gmail.com. So what is the password? So I'll give the password like this and phone number. So for example, here, let's copy this, use some phone number like 7. So this we want to update. Okay. So what is the details we have right now? To Sham like this. Now we are going to update with. So now we are going to update with these details. Now let's click on execute. ID. So you can remove that. This is not used. Okay, so now we'll get all the data here. So now let's do first it is going to add, and we will say it is modified. Now it will do the commit. Okay, so it should update now. So how I'll check? Go and get that particular user if you want to. Let's see whether it is modified or not. Instead of Sham, we should get the Krishna details. Yes, we got it. So next we need to implement the delete operation. Delete. So for delete, we'll just pass one ID. It should get delete. So similarly like this, we are getting one ID. So before that, first we need to fetch the record. How to fetch the record? Where user equals underscore db context dot your entity name user models dot first or default. Similarly like above, t implies t dot id, which is id equals to id. Fetch that particular record. If user is not equals to null, if user is not equals to null, means user is exist, then do the underscore db context dot remove user entity. Okay, so this is to delete, and let's do the save changes, commit. Okay, so let me try to run it. Okay, so delete, try it out. Let me give 5 here. Click on execute. So with the 5, let's fetch the record first. If record exists, then only it will do the delete operations. Right? There is a record Lakshman. Right? So same thing, we are going to remove save changes. So do continue. So now if you go and see this, get by ID with the name of 5, you won't get any record. Okay. There is no data. Right? Get, try it out. Disable all breakpoints. Click on continue. We'll get the 1, 2, 3, 4 only. 5th record got deleted. Understood, guys? Any doubts here? So what we have implemented briefly, using SQL Server database. Okay, using SQL Server database with the help of Web API, using code first approach, we have implemented the CRUD operations. Okay, so what we did first, we have created this model, user model, and we have specified the key attribute here. Second, we have created the context. Where is context? User context. Inside the data, we have created a user context, and we have created this constructor, and we have added that particular model. So then we have installed 3 packages, which is Entity Framework Core, Tools, and then SQL Server. So after that, we have added the connection string here. So we have added this connection string. After that, in the program.cs, we have added this connection. So after this, what we did, we have created a controller, which is manage user controller. So we have created the context with the dependency injection. We have injected, and then get method, which will do context.models.toList. Get by ID, whatever the ID you are passing, based on that, it will search with the database. It will get that particular record. Insert, add of into model, and this is to the commit, save changes. For update, Same command, along with that, we will specify the entity state is modified so that instead of insert, it will try to do the update. So delete, it will get the record and then check if it is not null, delete and do the commit. Got it, guys?
Thank you for watching.